Welcome, young mage, I'm Rhino. Today I have a deck tech for you. It's something my dad says hasn't been a thing for many years. It's Counterburn. If you don't know what that is, I'll tell you. And we're starting right now.
Reaching and teaching young mages of all ages.
When Guilds of Ravnica came out, my dad and I made a long list of decks we wanted to build. If you want to see them all, make sure you subscribe. And hit that bell notification so you don't miss a single one. When he said Counterburn, I had no idea what he was talking about. Then he showed me the card Ionize. Now it makes a lot of sense. We tried several versions of the deck. When I tried to play it in the deck the first time, it was strange. I'm so used to playing creatures. It's easy for new players to play creatures. That's why the welcome decks are mostly creatures. And this isn't that. You draw a card, play land, and pass the turn. But we do have a creature in the deck. Actually, two different ones, but I don't think you want to have both of them in the main deck. So one type is in the sideboard. We will get to those creatures later and why they are important. This is a spell-heavy deck, 32 spells. A lot of people would just put a playset of what they think are the best spells. But that would only give us 8 different spells. We want to be able to react to just about any deck a player would play. And so we have 12 different spells. They are basically burn spells, counter spells, and card draw spells. It's everything in this deck needs. Let's start with the burn spells. We have 3 shocks. Simple, 1 red to do 2 damage to any target. 2 lava coils. It's 1 and 1 red to do 4 damage to a creature. It's a sorcery, so you can only do it on your turn, but if it dies, you exile instead. This makes sure that creatures that come back from the grave don't. A playset of Lightning Strike. 1 and 1 red to do 3 damage to any target, and it's an instant speed. We have to have that in there. We have 2 copies of Fiery Cannonade. It's 2 and a red. It deals 2 damage to each non-pirate creature. Yes, it deals damage to our creatures too, but we really aren't playing creatures. No big deal. I have even used it to get rid of bigger creatures too. I'll show you how in just a bit. We also have 2 more spells that have burn, but it's not their main focus. Ionize is a counter spell for 1 with 1 blue and 1 red. This is what the deck is named after. And so we have to have 4 of them in the deck. It counters the spell, then burns the controller for 2. Yeah, I just stopped your spell. Oh, and you take 2 damage. The other spell is Risk Factor. This spell is so good. In the early game, most opponents will just take 4 damage. Later in the game, they can't afford to take damage, so you get the cards. Then you can hit them again by casting it from your graveyard. You just drew 3 cards, so discarding 1 is no big deal. Jumpstart is such a cool mechanic. We have 2 more spells with some burn in them, but they don't get played that way a lot. We'll get to that in a bit. We have 2 more counter spells other than Ionize. 2 copies of Syncopate. I've played this a lot when my opponent just cast their 6-drop using all of their mana. I just need to tap blue and 1 other, and that's it. no big creature. I've also cast it to force them to use up their mana, making an important 3-drop cost them 7. There's more than one way to use this spell, and that's so much fun. The last counter spell is Essence Scatter. Counters a creature. Just about every deck has a big creature as a win condition. We have 2 of these in the deck for that. And now card draw. I have found that I cast a lot of spells with this deck. They are all low cost, so I run out of cards real quick. I need the 2 copies of Radical Idea to do that quick draw. At first, I started with 2 copies of Opt, but I always wanted the card draw, and so the scry didn't do me any good. Once Opt is in the graveyard, you can't use it again. So Radical Idea with Jumpstart is much better. It costs a bit more, but you get to use it twice. The other is 2 copies of Chemister's Insight. This is double the cost of Radical Idea, but you get 2 cards. You may wonder why I didn't do a playset of Chemister's Insight. I found that I really liked having a draw early in the game before I get my 4th land out. So I split it between Radical Idea and Chemister's Insight. The final 2 spells are a mix. The first is 2 copies of Firemind's Research. This is a card draw or deal damage engine. It's not the greatest of enchantments, but it gets the job done. I use it most of the time for card draw. The other spell is a playset of Expansion or Explosion. I rarely use the Explosion side. If I get it later in the game, I found using Expansion, a copy spell, is much more useful. Like copying Fiery Cannonade, and so your opponent's creatures take 4 damage each. In fact, my dad copied Fiery Cannonade twice to deal 6 damage to all my creatures, taking out my Doom Whisperer and Underrealm Lich. Copying the burn spell can be really good. So you probably want to know what the creature in the deck is. I chose 4 copies of Electrostatic Field. It's a 2-drop 0/4 wall that pings your opponent each time you cast an instant or sorcery spell. It's a great blocker, and most players won't waste a removal spell on it. After all, it's only a 1 point of damage. It's annoying, not deadly. But I average doing 8 damage each game with it. After a while, they realize that, so the sideboard I have is Gutter Snipe. I never have both of them in the game. It's one or the other. We'll get into the sideboard in a moment. But first, the land. A total of 24 land cards. You might think that's too many. After all, mana curve is really low. But later in the game, you need a card to discard or jumpstart. I've discarded Sulphur Falls or even Steam Vents in the late game. You don't want to miss a land drop, and having extra lands to discard are very helpful. I added 2 Field of Ruin so you can wreck your opponent's mana base early on. I don't seem to do that very much. One thing I'm considering is putting in Reliquary Tower. There are times late in the game when I have 9 or more cards in the hand. I may not want to be forced to discard down to 7. It depends on the deck you play against. Finally, the sideboard. There's the 4 copies of Gutter Snipe swapped with the Electrostatic Field. There's one Izzet if you are going up against another counter deck. It can't be countered. There's also a lot of fun stuff when you play spells. 2 copies of Banefire, really good late in the game. Nice to have another spell that can't be countered. Just don't try to use expansion on it. 2 mission briefings so you can get a spell out of your graveyard. Nice to pull a jumpstart card to your hand so it doesn't get exiled. 2 negates so we have extra ways to counter spells. 1 search for Ascanta so you can pick the spells to put in your hand. 1 Ral Izzet Viceroy for card draw or creature removal. I have yet to ultimate him. And finally 2 Mirari Conjectures to return instant sorceries and copy them. That's it. It's pretty fast and very annoying. It has a lot of different things it can do. You can generally play it without the sideboard. You have plenty of options. The harder to get the cards are the lands. You can run more Guildgates and put in few Evolving Wilds. It will run slower, but will still be a lot of fun. I put a deck list for both of these versions in the description below. And if you want to see some gameplay, I have a video in the card above. It's a lot of fun to watch. What do you think of this deck? What would you change? I have some videos here and here. Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments. More videos coming out soon. So until then, Rhino out. 2 and a red. That just tears me apart.